Hello and welcome to the Victory Podcast. My name is Chris Haddad alongside my co-host, as always, Steve McGrath. Today's guest, three-time Super Bowl champion, Matt Chatham. If you are unfamiliar with Matt Chatham, well, let's get you familiar. North High School in Iowa, all-state in football and baseball. From there, he attended University of South Dakota. Coming out of South Dakota, he signed with the St. Louis Rams as an undrafted rookie free agent, where then he found a home with the New England Patriots, where, of course, he won 3 Super Bowls. You can find him now color reporting, NESN, ESPN, writing for The Athletic. This guy does it all. Matt, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Chris and Steve.
All right. So, Matt, I want to jump right into this. Talk about your journey going from North High School. Why did you choose University of South Dakota? What was the decision that led you there ultimately to play linebacker?
Yeah, I mean, oddly enough, I'm from Sioux City, Iowa. Sioux City is about 100,000 people. The closest thing comparable here that a lot of Mass fans would know is it's a little bit like Worcester, comparable size, comparable demographic kind of thing. So I actually kind of grew up thinking I was sort of a city kid. I mean, I know it sounds silly from Iowa, but I mean, I wasn't from a farm or anything like that. No ag background, nothing along those lines. But I went to a high school of like 1,500 students, you know, at a pretty good sized graduating class. And the only school that was a Division II school that I had even mildly entertained was USD. I was a diehard Hawkeye fan, Iowa Hawkeye fan as a kid.
Yep.
All my other visits were with Division I schools. Hayden Fry's the old head coach at the time there when I was coming out of high school in '95. So I took I took my official visit and then took an unofficial visit back to Iowa. I went to a Michigan State game in Northwestern. I mean, I was wine, dine, love it. They didn't offer me though, and in part at the time, this is, they would give you this speech. They loved the, oh, Matt, just hold on. And there was another guy, a star ahead of me. I'm a 3, he's a 4 kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a bigger name dude from Texas that they were holding on to the last minute. And he did one of the, I think this is pre-hat flip because we're mid-90s, but he didn't announce it until day of. And when we got within a few days of signing day, and I had other places. I had visited Iowa State and University of Northern Iowa, which is a 1AA school at the time, and Texas Tech was my other offer to go down, and I just didn't take it. It was too far. I'm kind of a homebody, and I was like, I wanted so badly to be a Hawkeye. It's my dream since I was a little kid, and with my parents, you have a full ride scholarship. We're very middle class, whatever that means. And just the idea of completely fully paid school is really tough to turn that down. And I'm having that debate back and forth with my parents about trying to wait the thing out on Iowa. And the other schools get nervous, or they're going to pull it. They're going to offer it to someone else, and that happens. So we eventually I couldn't wait to see what that kid was going to do. And it sounds pejorative, I guess, or whatever. It sounds negative with South Dakota, but my frame of mind as a 17-year-old kid at the time is that was kind of my fallback school. And I ended up accepting there because I was kind of left out in the cold. He switched on them. Iowa talked to me about, we can be a priority walk-on or something like that at that point. And I was like, no. And my parents were like, no, you're going where the money is. And by the other time, those other places that offered me had gone away because I waited out the other schools. So I went to USD, had an awesome experience there, though. Got to play right away when you go to the smaller school, and definitely needed the development time. I was 6'4", 195 pounds when I came out. I played safety for a full year of college that first year, and I played the NFL in the 250s. So I was really thin and tall. So you kind of don't have a position. That's actually what Hayden Fry had kind of poked me about at the time when they weren't offering me. He's like, what are you? What are you going to play?
Yep.
You're a safety, but there aren't very many 6'4" safeties like the Chancellors of the world. There are not a lot of them out there. And if I'd have put weight on my frame, I'd have been playing a position they hadn't seen me play. So I get it. So I ended up going to USD and end up playing well there for several years and end up in their Hall of Fame. And they're good enough. There's enough exposure at the FCS level now that you still get looked. You still get seen. There's just always that kind of question mark over your head of, well, how does it translate against some of the bigger schools?
Exactly. Yep.
So we had at the time that was called the Snow Bowl, which no longer exists. But the Snow Bowl at the time was essentially like a Division II Senior Bowl. So we had sort of our version of it up at North Dakota State's facility in Fargo, where they've had a game many times. A really good place. But we had there. I performed well and kind of just sit on the outside and ended up signing as an undrafted free agent. I waited out the draft. My agent at the time was buddies with John Clayton from back in the day, the ESPN guy, a long time. Yeah. And we'd get the little call, a little text message or whatever, called during the draft. You're on the board in the 5th round. You're on in the 6th. Cleveland's interested. Indy's interested. St. Louis. Those are the 3 teams. And you just wait. And then you're sitting there going, oh, crap. Now I didn't, none of the 3 happened. So,
yeah. And that's why I just want to back up a little bit here. So when you were coming out, you had a great 4-year career at South Dakota. When did you know you were essentially NFL ready and started to get agents prepped in? Or was it just, as you got closer to it, it was, people started to talk you into, hey, this is going to be becoming a reality because you performed well at the Snowball?
Yeah, I think part of it, and I say this because I just kind of get how it works. It's certainly not patting myself on the back, because I there's a lot of my own teammates that I played with that played just as well at the collegiate level. Super tackle guys. One of my buddies, one of my best friends, Nathan Lake was our middle linebacker. He'd make every tackle. He'd middle the defense. Everything's going to Nate. But what happens at that level pretty frequently is, it's the body type match. Nate's 6 foot and 225. I'm 6'4" and 240 or whatever. So and I can run. I test better, and that's kind of what happens a lot of times at the lower levels. And it's it is what it is. You kind of, fortunately, I had that body type, so you kind of take it and run with it. But so to answer your question, when I knew, you're that size. I'm starting to grow my body. I'm huge. I look probably more like a Division I big school guy, and so even after my junior year, all conference at that time, and then they still, even at that lower level, they still have pro days. So they come, but at our pro day, might have a dozen NFL teams, and it's the area scout, which is way down the list. But
sure.
They're there, So I think after my junior year, having a nice season, people showed up prior to my senior. I knew I had a pretty good shot at it. But again, it's always kind of an uncomfortable situation because you kind of get why it happens. I ran well the 40, work out well, 25 reps on the bench, all that stuff, and that really helps make the case. It's not had a lot of tackles in Division II. Nobody cares about that.
Yeah. So you go. I mean, you mentioned earlier, 6th round comes, 7th round comes, and you're kind of sitting there waiting. Can you take us through that experience and what that day was like for you?
Yeah, one of the things that I knew I had working against me is, preseason All-American going into my senior year, and there's a select group of D2 guys that you kind of know. All of the biggest time guys in Division I are going to go. The FCS level, there's maybe 15, 20 that have good shot of being drafted. The D2 guys, it's a smaller community. You can look at it each and every year. Might be less than 5 guys that get drafted somewhere. Mm-hmm. And, I was kind of hearing that I was in that group, but in full candor, we had a terrible senior year. Our team was bad, 3-8. I felt like I played the same, but, I mean, it's a team sport. So, it takes a little of the shine off you, So I went down with, I think the expectations lowered a little bit. So, and then I actually had an MCL injury, nothing that required surgery, but I wasn't able to do all the 40s and stuff until my pro day later. So I knew there were a ton of knocks against me. So going into the draft, I'd had that sort of late round tag on you that you get. And late means different things to different people. It could mean 4 to some teams, but maybe it's 7. So yeah, you kind of ride the roller coaster. My agent was located in Minneapolis. He represents a lot of Vikings players, which is kind of typical if you're in South Dakota. The reps that are up north. And I went to his house. So I'm obviously not at a draft. I'm sitting at my agent's house in what was it? Burnsville, Minnesota, I believe it was, just south of the city. But sitting in his basement, big screen with just my dad and I and my agent. And those calls would come on the second day. And yeah, you start to go, it's going to happen, it's going to happen, it's going to happen. But I think, it all works out for the best. I'm kind of a faithy guy. And I kind of think that it worked out better for me that invariably I was able to choose between the 3 places, because that's typically what happens. Crap, I didn't get drafted. Oh, wait, that's actually better, because especially in today's age, 6th, 7th round, you're not guaranteed sticking on that roster as a later round draft pick anyway. Being an undrafted guy, at least you get to choose the spots. You can look at the roster, say, hey, I'm an outside linebacker. Who else do they have? And what are their situations, who came in, that kind of thing. And my situation was the Rams was where we chose. They were coming off their 2-14 season, atrocious in '98, going into '99. That's the year they won the whole thing. Yeah. But there was the Leonard Little situation, and I don't know if you recall that one. Leonard unfortunately got in the drunk driving accident. And this had happened he was our first round pick in '98. This had happened in, I think it was December, end of year of his rookie season. He gets in the accident. The death happens. It was a terrible situation, and you can imagine if something like that would happen in today's NFL, it would have been handled much differently. But back then, they went through the offseason kind of dealing with what was going to happen, and I think invariably he got time served. So he missed the games throughout December, and I think that was the end of it. But at the time, I'm looking at a roster going, oh, okay, top outside linebacker, looks like he might be suspended for a year or, might not be there. And so it looked like a vacancy, and that was sort of the case my agent was making me. That's the spot. Well, in the middle of that summer, after I'd already chose that spot, he was reinstated. And then they signed a veteran free agent, and it's like, oh, wow, that depth chart looks unwinnable. They're much different than New England is here with the Patriots. My position coach literally came to me and says, wow, that news is crazy. It's good for the team, but you're not going to be on the roster. And this is like literally before preseason games. He's like, hey, you're going to be fighting for a practice squad job. We love you. You're going to be a practice squad guy, and then you'll have a chance to work. I'm like, well, I don't want that. I want to go to Indy or Cleveland. I would have chosen the other places. So just had to kind of work through that. Invariably, I was released, and then next thing you know, I'm in New England. Yeah.
So I want to talk about the bridge between St. Louis and New England. I'll let Steve jump in here in a second, but can you talk about like just the mental grind, so to say, when you were in camp with St. Louis? You work your tail off, and then you get the news. The roller coasters of emotions, I'm sure, where it's up, it's down, it's up, and then New England gives you a call. Can you walk through that part of the free agency?
Well, and again, I have to kind of put a little extra detail around this because I fudged some of this, and I probably have one of the more bizarre starts to a career. 99 season, I was actually back home in college. So I had been signed by them as an undrafted free agent. I got that news from my coach. We were in training camp practices. I went from, taking a lot of reps with the backup guys. I'm on a lot of the first units for special teams. It's looking good. They seem to like me. Everything feels great. Then the news came down. Guy returns to practice. I find myself standing on the sideline for practice, 3 hot days in Macomb, Illinois, just standing there for 3 hours at a time. And all of a sudden, I'm not a mature guy. I'm a young dude. I don't know what's going on, and my mind is racing. I'm like, okay, so I'm wasting my time here. I want to play in the NFL. I've been practicing here for a few months with these guys. I think I can fit in. And, I went back upstairs to Charlie Army, who was the GM at the time, and then I invariably was talked to Coach Vermeil, and I said, Coach, like if the situation's changed for you, that's okay. I completely get it. But I want to play in the NFL, and I don't want to hold a dummy for some other guy. And, it's arrogant as all hell. I freely admit that. I think as a young guy, I didn't really have much of a concept of what practice squad meant. I thought it was just, I'm here for your betterment kind of thing. And in today's NFL, that's not it at all. It's basically a group that works their way up onto the roster at some point during the season. But I didn't see it that way at the time. And I had that full ride scholarship back at school. And in the event that I didn't use it, it was going to go away. So I just said, hey, please release me. I'd love to go. There were other teams who were interested in me coming out of school. And they said, no, we're going to retain your rights. We think you can be a player for us eventually. So I actually left training camp in '99 and went back to college. So I entered the whole '99 season. The Rams retained my rights, and I finished out my final semester. I double majored in English and criminal justice, graduated from South Dakota that fall. So then I re-entered training off-season program in 2000 with St. Louis. So I went through that whole St. Louis off-season program, and that was now Mike Martz's first year. So I'm back home at USD, college campus, booze, the whole thing, and and the Rams are going through a Super Bowl run on a team that I was in training camp with. I thought was 2-14 from the year before. Yep. So it was one of the biggest, obvious, most glaring learning lessons of my life that maybe I should have stuck that out or shouldn't have pressed the issue so hard. But invariably, I come back in 2000. I went back and talked to Charlie. He says, no, we'd love to have you back. Went through the camp. Everything went wonderful. Actually got my training, my playbook after the 4 preseason games. Had thought that I had made the roster, And so usually it's, end of that fourth preseason game will be end of the week, or maybe even a Thursday or Friday. So you have that few days of uncertainty, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. You think you made it. Your coach won't exactly tell you, but he's like, you're good, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I got mine. I got the big playbook, the week 1 playbook. And then I was released on Monday.
Wow, it was like a tease. They were like, "Oh, here you go, but give it back to us on Monday."
Exactly. You thought you made it, but I didn't. So, and what had happened is, I always, it's been many years. This is, we're like 18 years removed from this now, but I think it was Tony Horn. It was a really good wide receiver for them, but it was something to do with the wide receiver situation. That he was also a returner for them, and he had a hamstring issue, and they were really concerned he'd be available for week 1. So they brought in like this emergency wide receiver, and you learn at that moment, oh no, I'm number 53 on the 53-man roster. They're going to try to just put you down for a minute, and they did. And the minute I was put down, Scott Pioli, claimed me off waivers. So I was told, hey, we just have to protect you for the weekend. You're going to go down. We'll be on practice squad for week 1 until the situation resolves itself, and we'll be back up. And within a matter of hours, I'm on the phone with my agent going, "You're going to New England." And I go, "Well, where's that?" Top right, right? Top right.
Top right, yeah.
And that was it. So, and my only reference was Tecmo Bowl. I remember the little map with Ben Winter coats and everything. But now I'm a Patriot. And then week 1 I was playing for the Pats. So it was crazy whirlwind.
Yeah, and just want to make one more point here. I'll let Steve dive in. I thought it was interesting when we had Antoine Smith on the podcast. He mentioned one thing about Belichick that he loved was, and I'm sure you can attest to this too, was he never kind of put you in the doghouse, right? Where some coaches would put you in the doghouse and either not talk to you, or when something was wrong. He's like, Belichick always addressed a situation where if you messed up, he was going to sit you down and film and show you why you messed up. So I'm sure in St. Louis, just hearing your story, you would have loved to have that, just some clarity or some transparency of why I'm sitting on the sideline holding a bag for 3 practices in a row.
Yeah, you certainly know where you stand in New England. I think that's clear. It can change in a hurry. That's definitely part of it.
So, Matt, I just want to ask now, you get to New England. Now, hindsight being what it is, we know that this is how Matt Chatham gets the bulk of his NFL career. But what's it like? You think you're in the Rams situation, and then all of a sudden, in the course of one day, it's a complete 90-degree turn. How do you mentally adjust now to everything that you just talked about to now, I'm in a new team, new coach. I have no idea what's going on here. But, I mean, the season, we'll get into what that actually happened that season. But just mentally, what's your approach now to just trying to adjust to this whole new set of circumstances?
Well, I think one of the things that's really important when I was dealing with that is, again, as an older guy now being candid about it, you're not terribly equipped to handle it. You just kind of feel, it's not as if I was some uber mature guy. I didn't know what to think. I was pissed. I was upset. I was confused. I was very emotional. You don't sleep very well. It's hard to eat. You're just, where am I? What am I doing? And part of this is, I was not yet married, but my wife and I had been dating since high school. We were one of those oddball stories. So we had, dated through high school, dated through college. She was actually a really good athlete. A softball scholarship to the University of South Dakota, a really good player for them, plays, throughout her career there. So she trails me by a year. I was a senior and she was a junior in high school when we met, but she went she was a mathematics major, super smart, at the University of South Dakota. She graduates and comes down to live in St. Louis with me and enrolls in an MBA program there at a school called Webster University in downtown St. Louis. So she enrolls in a 2-year MBA program, and then I get cut. And it's not, it's so all of a sudden it's like, oh, wow, you came here. Now you're stuck in a 2-year program. So that year that I'm up in that fall, then I'm all of a sudden I'm staying at a Westin out at the airport in Boston, and then driven down to Foxborough in some old van or whatever, and it's the old Foxborough Stadium. So facilities are pretty trashy relative to what I just come from in Earth City in St. Louis. So yeah, your mind's racing. You kind of feel like a jerk that, wow, I had confidence I was going to be there. It was sort of a confidence move for her to enroll in the school thinking I would be there. You learn later there's no certainties in the NFL, but then you're kind of out here alone. So out of nowhere, I'm airlifted. I drop into Boston. I'm taken down to this terrible little hotel, and I'm sorry to the people that own that place, but it was a place called the End Zone Hotel right across the street from the stadium. But it's an infamous old place that a lot of players have come through. You came in a free agency or waivers or rookies or whatever. We all lived across the street from the old Sullivan Stadium, Foxborough Stadium at the End Zone. So emotionally, I'm staying in a hotel where I can reach out and touch both walls of the hallway, and I can hear every conversation 3 halls down. I mean, it just felt very not NFL. So, it's just that first year was tough. And then at week 1, I'm on the field. I'm out there playing some linebacker and then all the special teams, and I got to learn Belichick's defense in 3 days. It's insane to even think about that in retro, and looking back, but that's what it was. So I didn't know anything until at least 12 months from then. So really just dragging myself for that first year. It was, I think, good for me in the long run, but man, it was not easy.
So yeah, well, first of all, definitely not the renaissance that's in Patriot Place now. Easy to say. Players today have a little bit easier, but so personally, you talked about how you adjusted to it, but this is now the Patriots' first Super Bowl run. So what is it like seeing just, you're joining this team, you're getting used to everything, Bledsoe goes down. So, I mean, it's just sort of like you have your personal turmoil, the team has its own situations that it's working through. What was the roller coaster ride of that season? And, at what point did the expectations go from like, let's just see, what we can do here to, we're going to go in and knock off Goliath?
Yeah, well, I think one of the biggest things that sometimes gets brushed by, and I completely get it, but the 18 years that Belichick has had here, that 5-11 season that precedes the run we had was like, there's a brotherhood of guys that went through that year. That was a hard year. I mean, that was the 3-hour practice thing, and back in Monday morning doing physical stuff, and after losses, and just a long season. Rob Ryan's my old coach, Pepper Johnson. Both guys were working with the linebackers. But, I mean, we were breaking down film and doing 60 and 70-hour weeks and practice and, like a normal NFL player does. But it was a dark place. The facilities weren't great. We weren't a good team. It was a real roster overhaul. One of my good buddies, Joe Andruzzi, who was starting left guard on that team. Joe got cut from the Packers, the same as I got cut from the Rams, and we were both brought in waivers at the time, so we were both end zone guys for a while. But that team, Sali Asaya, I think I'm saying that name, big, huge Samoan dude, came in, and same thing. Another team cut, hey, start on week 1, at guard. But that team was made up, the 2000 team was made up of, I hope I get this right, but at the time it was like a league high number of roster releases on final day. So basically, most teams they maybe cut down to 51 and get a couple of street guys that other teams have cut. It's pretty unusual when they go down like 4, 5, 6 bodies, which is kind of an indication of what the in-house staff believes they have left of them by the last one. They said, we don't have 53 good guys. We don't have 53 guys who can win with. So there was, whatever it was, half a dozen of us that came in that were the new blood. That took multiple months till we ever really realized what was going on. But I think that year was important because you go back through the training camp, and it was a roster makeover. I mean, there were so many new faces in there, and Bill kind of just started to gravitate towards the guys that he could trust, that played it his way, the air quote tough and smart guys. And he was really looking for his kind of people. So it was, you have to kind of learn to be one of those. I mean, there's 32 different programs out there that are all the same, and it doesn't have to be Bills. But if you wanted to be there, you had to do it a certain way. And I think that was probably the darkest tunnel I ever went through. But you just feel like it was such a good life experience, made you stronger down the road.
Wow. So obviously it worked though, because hindsight being what it is, that team's able to now come together, new faces. Brady comes out of left field. No one, of course, expected anything of him, out of the gate as a rookie. What was it like, now that darkness is now in the past, to go flip the switch from the darkness to the absolute pinnacle of the sport?
I mean, it's cool. And again, sort of the travels there that particular year is the team had struggled. That's what makes the change to Bill. They go 5-11. Bill's coming from Cleveland. He'd taken him to a high point, but it didn't end well for him there. So there's a certain cynicism, I think, here locally about what he was going to be able to do with the team, especially with Happy Pete Carroll being the guy that preceded him. After 5-11, hard training camp down there in Rhode Island. We get back. We start extremely slow, whatever it was, 1-3. We were ugly, and down in Miami, ugly against Cincy, I believe it was. We started the first month kind of like we did the year before. So even that 0-1 turnaround year, most of the real happy, good feeling stuff didn't come till mid-year anyway. We started to break through, had the big win against the Colts, looked good against San Diego, played the Rams really tough, but lost at home. I think it was a close game, like 2018, somewhere in that range. But, I obviously know the thing when the Jets game, when Drew got hurt and Tom came in and replaced him. But I think it was just more of that wasn't a miracle season. It had more of a miracle half season feel to it, where a lot of the first half still had a very similar drag to it. But again, I think it ended up being the 53 that showed up there in New Orleans with the guys that basically made it through the wash. He was still changing that roster, trying to find out who his guys were going to be. And we were damn good by the end of it, but it's not who arrived there on opening day for sure.
All right. I just wanted to fast forward a little bit. Of course, there's the first Super Bowl team, but then after that, you guys kind of take a step back, and it's not exactly the same caliber of performance. The playoffs weren't happening that year. But then again, fast forward another year, it's another Super Bowl victory. What, at that point now, what is it about the makeup of the guys, what Belichick is doing, what buttons he's pushing that sort of, it's not a fluke. There's a second one, but how has that ship sort of been righted to get to the point where there's now sustainable success?
Well, it's one of the lessons that I kind of I've taken from Coach Belichick that I think is good to watch. That he's certainly not. You look at the 0-1 team and all we accomplished down the stretch, but again, that wasn't the day one team. That wasn't, hey, this is a flush roster, we're going to make a run at it. That run was really more about what that group learned in season, the way they sort of filled in some of the cracks and how good we took to the coaching and how you had some really tough characters, the Troy Browns of the world and Brewskis and Ted Johnson and Willie McGinnis and Frabes. Mike Vrabel comes in and has a big role kind of out of nowhere, and Tom just at the very infancy stage of who he's going to be. Antoine Smith carrying the ball is sort of a cast off from Buffalo. I mean, we were a motley crew. David Patton, sort of revival career guy. David Given. I mean, this was a very I don't remember if Dave was on the team, but the point is, this was a Jermaine Wiggins. I mean, all these guys, literally all of them are. There's some fringe guys. Then there's the Willie McGinnises, the really high draft capital guys, and top of it, Lawyer Malloy and Tabucky Jones and Ty Law, all those guys. There was a tremendous amount of talent over there, but it was a piled together kind of group. So the lesson I mean to sort of reflect here is that the next year, I think Bill still looked at that roster and didn't think it was good enough to do this, going forward. There was a good amount of turnover. It's like, hey, y'all won the Super Bowl. There's like 15 of you that aren't going to be a part of this, And so he was still really remaking that group. And, a lot of them that, we didn't play well in 2002. We were okay. We're like a 9-7 team, but play well below the standard of what we did at the last half of the year prior. So, then the emphasis there though is that just he was building something. He had something in mind that had a much longer view than what was going on at that time. So 0-1 was awesome, but he wasn't going to try to play the 0-1 team for the next half decade. He remade it, didn't quite hit it out of the park then, but a few of those extra bodies stick. And then when you look at the 0-3 team, now he's got more of really his people in there. And then you're getting Ty Warren in the room, and Richard's an older guy. Richard Seymour's an older guy now. And it's really just his roster, his views started to come together better. And you get the right amount of people in the room that are willing to buy in.
Well, before we go to the next Super Bowl team, though, I need to ask, the 0-3 season, Matt Chatham gets his first NFL touchdown. Yeah. Can you just quickly walk us through what that was like for you? Did you ever expect or hope to get a touchdown in the NFL, and what did that mean?
Yeah, my background in high school, I was actually I got All-State as a safety the senior year. I don't remember exactly what the title was, but I moved up the charts in Iowa as a wide receiver, oddly enough. So I was used to being like, I wanted the ball. Like the way my Vrabel was, became the tight end.
Yeah, right.
Got to get the ball. And I had that background, and I ended up just choosing a position in college. But I always wanted the ball, man. I love that as a kid. It's kind of weird how it's sort of random that you get chosen which side you'll go to. But no, in the NFL, I mean, if as a linebacker, if you get to touch the ball, it's a rarity. So Tiki Barber puts it on the ground. Tyrone Poole made a nice play shooting into him. I had to beat my block and just scoop and score. So it was kind of right place, right time. So, I think, oh gosh, I mean, over the course of my career, especially as a backup guy, I'm playing somewhere in the range of 10 to 20 plays a game of defense, and then all my regular special teams plays. So you don't get your hand on the ball a lot. It's just that one moment, and it's like you got to make the most of it. And fortunately, it turned out well. Funny story from that, Brewski was in a middle linebacker on the time. I was playing right outside linebacker. And after I'd scooped it, I scored. I spiked the ball, and Brew ran and went and got the ball. And I'm elated. I don't even know where I'm at the point. I'm so freaking out that I scored a touchdown. And I'm making my way back over the sideline. Brew's kind of celebrating with me, and he hands me the ball. Now, I mean, I didn't register that was that ball, but I just took it and I spiked it again. And he comes back to me 2 minutes later on the sideline. It's like, dummy, that was the ball. You're supposed to keep the ball. Like, I don't know protocol. Like, I don't do this often,
All right, but just now to wrap up just our Patriots little segment here. We know, of course, Vinatieri again comes through. The third Super Bowl in 4 years happens. At this point, what is it, if you could break down into maybe one or two core things? How did Belichick, outside of just getting his guys, what were just some of the guiding principles that took this team from where it had come from to now being the first dynasty in quite some time, and unlike anything we've seen since?
Yeah, I would say I still do think it does tie into the his guys thing, but it's what his version of the guys needed to be, and it was really versatile people that could do a lot of stuff. We were a tough matchup, and we played a lot of close games. We won every single close game. We were a lot of single scores, even through those runs where we're winning 22 in a row or whatever it was. That real long stretch of games that kind of went over the top, 03 and then 04. But through that stretch, we just didn't lose. And we didn't really beat people by 4 scores much, but it was a lot of the single score stuff. But part of it was we were such a tough game plan team. Ran the football really well. That was more the Corey Dillon years by then. Had a lot of really hard-charging, tough guys, low penalized. The offensive line was really good during those years. Defensively, it was just a bunch of dudes that could do a lot of different things. You look at Rodney Harrison, he's in there by then. But from our linebacker core, it's something that I'm always most proud of, to have been a part of that group. That core of linebackers, and as versatile as it would is sort of accomplished as those guys were, from Willie McGinnis on one side and Vrabel on the other. And then you get Rosie Colvin, who came in as the extra guy, who was, like a double-digit sack guy at Chicago before he comes to us. He's really not even necessarily a starter. He's like the rotating third at outside. He moves to outside to start, and that moves Vrabel inside alongside Brewski. And you still got Roman Pfeiffer in that group, and Ted Johnson, who's a former, high pick. I mean, that room was loaded. And then Larry Izzo is the all-time, special teams guy of that era. I mean, it was fun to be in that room. It was fun to be a part of that group. I think collectively that was one of my biggest joys in really all this, that we had a group of guys and that crew could play a whole bunch of different positions. Fife could play outside and he could play inside. He could play Will linebacker, the weak side linebacker, even a little Mike if he had to, but he could play on the edges also. And it kind of became that for me. I had to learn to do stuff. I believe it was in the 04 season when Vrabel broke his forearm. He had a plate put in his arm and he missed a handful of games. And I ended up starting the games that Mike was out, 5 or 6 or whatever that was. But at that time, I mean, I was an outside guy for life, a safety in college, and I'm coming down playing mostly outside linebacker. I had to learn Mike linebacker. I played a handful of games as next to Brewski or something on the inside and that was kind of what it was all about. You had to learn everything. Braves started a bunch of games for the Patriots as an inside linebacker. His body type's a DN from Ohio State. He's not but he played really effectively inside himself. And even Brewski, who was at one point when it was earlier in his career alongside Ted Johnson, he was playing weak side linebacker to Ted's Mike. Brew became a Mike. He became the sort of tip of the spear guy. And then Fife moved alongside him. So you really have a room full of guys that kind of just played all the positions. And I think that really helped this. It was that versatility. I mean, I'm talking about the position group I know best, but that there was really a roster full of guys that were super versatile. And week in, week out, we'd come up with a new game plan because people just couldn't pin us down.
You know, before I hand it back off to Chris, you know, it speaks volumes that that's true, but also look at what all you guys are doing. All of you are analysts. You know, yeah. Of course, Vrabel's now head coach. I believe Roman Pfeiffer's a coach at UCLA. I mean, that versatility probably has gone hand in hand with what you guys have been able to do after the life of, you know, football as an athlete.
Yeah, you can imagine what those linebacker meeting rooms are like. You got a lot of sharp dudes in there that got a pretty good grasp of the scheme that kind of like to argue a little bit too. And it's, you know, if you come back with something you don't like, you know, Bruce can be the first guy to throw it back up there. Braves can be the first one out of it. No, we can't do it like this. Let's do it like this, that kind of thing. Now, you know, we had Dean Pease as a linebacker coach for a while, Pepper Johnson for many of those years. You know, we always, you know, Rack, who was the D coordinator, but we had Rack, we had Dean, we had, you know, a lot of people sort of cycle through there. Rob Ryan at one point, and Pep. But it was a linebacker room. It was full of a lot of strong personality. You know, years prior in the early year, 01, Brian Cox is in there as well. Mm-hmm. So I mean, that was just. I mean, you know, I'm used to being the strong personality, at least from college and most of the places I go. You get in there and it's like, wow, there's like 10 alphas in this room. Like this is you're gonna get something done with this group. So.
Yeah. Now, Steve touched on it a little bit, but after the Patriots, you play 3 years with the Jets. When did you know, was it your body telling you, or when did you know that it was time to call it quits and then ultimately get into the analyst career that you're currently sitting in?
Yeah, so the Jets years are, you know, I don't begrudge them. You know, it was an interesting experience. It was cool to go down there. It was, I think it was more back to what my career started. Really had to grind through to get it going. The Jets years were a grind for me because I signed the nice deal there. It's an opportunity to go down and have a chance to compete to start at outside linebacker. That was important to me in free agency. You know, as loaded as that room was in New England, that was never going to happen there. You're behind guys like Willie and Vrabel, stay there for the rest of my career. So there was an option to go down and have a chance to start down there. Our very first mini camp, you know, the mandatory summer mini camp in New York, and we're out in the outdoor fields, the crappy old turf at Hofstra. I blew out my sesamoid joint. So your big toe joint, the joint of my foot, I ripped it, dislocated my foot, big toe so badly that I ended up having reconstructive surgery after the season. But I've got my big opportunity. This is going to be a spot to expand my role. And covering Thomas Jones. Thomas was the Virginia running back, Bears running back, real good player. Have him out in space. I just, covered him, nothing playing mini camp, and I cut in that turf and my toe caught somehow. And it completely shredded. And I had to make a decision. I've been named a captain on that Jets team. And, you've just arrived. You've gotten a little bit of money. You feel kind of an obligation. After a mini camp practice, you don't want to bail at that point. So I had with the doctors to sort of decide, hey, do I have to get surgery? Is it over? Like, nah, you can sew it up, tape it up, and we'll try to play through the year. So I ended up getting this super stiff shoe. They called it, it's a Zero Flex. It's made of carbon fiber. But basically, I was a Nike guy at the time, and they would the front half of the shoe is carbon fiber, so it doesn't flex. So I had to run flat-footed. Yeah.
Stop. Yeah.
Terrible. But I'd get a new pair of shoes for each game, cut an X in the side so the sesamoid joint could stick out. So basically my toe would sit sort of sideways. So you'd see the bump like a person will have like a big –
wow.
My sock and, about a half inch there would stick out the bunion out of the side of my shoe. You have to cut it to release pressure so that it could stick there. And then I would pad over the top of it. I was running around with a club foot. So that's a long, long story to basically say I got it out that 06 season. Came back 07, and you've had the reconstructive surgery, but you can tell you're not the same guy. It's like an ACL on a foot. Like I had a foot. So I drug myself through 07, go into 08, and you kind of know my wife and I, like, this is my 10th training camp. I'm not the same guy. The opportunity was going to be there, doesn't happen because I'm all banged up. But I've dragged myself through it because you're a captain. You kind of feel like you got to still be the leader. But you kind of knew it was coming to an end. So you just, when they cut you, you're kind of like, yeah, I get it.
Yeah. Now, before I hand it off to Steve for the gauntlet, is the broadcast career and everything you're doing on the sidelines and with Nessa and ESPN, is that something that you knew probably halfway through your career, hey, I want to get into this business, or did you kind of fall into it?
No, I definitely fell into it, Chris. I was a pre-law guy at the University of South Dakota, so I doubled in English and criminal justice, and I intended to go to law school. I took my LSATs. I applied at UT Austin. I applied at Emory in Atlanta, University of Minnesota, U of M. I applied at the University of Iowa, and then again, South Dakota was my fallback school. So, I was sitting and waiting to go to either law school or to go into the NFL, and the NFL thing happened for me, so I tabled that. But when I got done, I was a young guy. I was still 17 when I was going into college. I was still 21 when I had just come to the NFL. So even though it was 10 training camps in, I was 31. So, I wasn't 36 or 7, but I was looking at that point, and I didn't want to go to 3 full years of law school. You just starting to do that and then not even being able to practice till you're 35. That was a tough swallow. So
sure.
I went and got an MBA. So I kind of looked at it and had talked to a lot of other people, and you talk to other former players, and a lot of the guys like to get investments. A lot of guys like to do different business things once they get out. But in full candor, we don't have that background. So my thought was, let's take advantage of this and get a better business background before we dive into those things. So I went to Babson College. I'd applied at Harvard, BC, and Babson, and ended up just loving Babson. It's the #1 rated entrepreneurial school in the country. 25 years in a row. Amazing program, and it's small. So you go in and you're in classrooms with like 15 people who are all starting little businesses themselves. So I went there, no broadcast idea, not at all, 0.0. That's not what I'm doing. And I lived up there in Wellesley, just kind of away from football. The first year I was back from New York, I for sure didn't really have any association with Foxborough. Maybe didn't even watch every game, to be perfectly honest with you. So, but once I had graduated 2 years later, started a restaurant. I was getting a little involved in some random business things, and the on-air guy, my boss now at Nesson, Larry Lawson. Larry was coordinating producer, I believe, at the time, and it would come down to my restaurant and say, Matt, just come do one segment a week. Come do da-da-da-da. And, they just kept knocking on that door. And I knew a lot of people back at KSP, Craft Sports Productions, the sort of in-house thing there at the stadium, the Patriots and Patriots.com and all that kind of stuff. And they were asking around too, were you willing to do this stuff? And what I always liked about it is initially I could do it a little. I could still have the other stuff and do one segment a week, one show a week, something like that, and still go off and have another life. But then what's happened since then is then I pick up, doing college football games every weekend on ESPN here locally, and then Nesson becomes a full-time job. And then, I was going to write. And so I took a gig with the Herald, and then I worked at BTN for a couple of years. And, it's just they started compiling until you turn around and go, oh, I guess I'm a full-time media.
So that happened real fast, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, Matt, before I jump into the gauntlet, just one quick last question for you. You've made your NFL career on being a special teams guy, and at the end with the Jets, you had a chance to really compete and be out there. But a lot of it was as a reserve linebacker as well. So I just wanted to ask you, how did you go about, how much time did you actually have to dedicate to being fully prepared on special teams? Just what was the practicing like and the film for that? And how did you fit that in with just your typical linebacker prep?
Yeah, so I would say one of the really things I liked a lot about our crew is Larry Izzo's consummate pro. I mean, he's a lunatic, but he's a consummate pro as far as preparation. He loves to dive into film study. He and I and some of our other buddies in the room, Gerard Cherry, Don Davis, Patrick Pass, a lot of the other guys that came and went through that room. But we had, core teams. That's the phrase they use now, just the core 4 guys or whatever. The guys that basically do special teams as your job first. But you have to be good on the Patriots at your position, or you don't keep your gig. And I think that's the one thing that's a little bit unique here. There are other places where, basically the special teams are made up of the guys that don't start at a position. And New England thinks of it. Really, you have to be able to do both. If you can't, there aren't very many guys who are core that absolutely couldn't play the position if they were called on in the moment. So I would still have to take full reps during the practice week. I would still play linebacker during games. It's just you're not playing 45 to 55 snaps. You're playing 10 to 25, or just depending on what's going on in the week. But you end up with 30 snaps of special teams too, and you sort of study that a lot the same way. So it just kind of makes your load a little heavier. And I think, again, with us being a 3-4 team for the 6 years I was here, and me being a reserve, I had to know all 4 spots, and Pepper was great with that. Pepper Johnson was obviously a big time guy playing for the Giants years ago, but Pep played all over the group there, and they played in 3-4s also. So it was great having a coach that understood all sides of it, and Rob Ryan was really great as well. But you'd have to go in saying, okay, I only got like a period, maybe 10 practice reps at Mike, but in an emergency, I might have to go in there. You never know. But then I would have to really be honed in on the outside linebacker stuff and special teams always. So what was cool is we had a group that we kind of led the meetings with Brad Seeley, one of the best special teams coaches out there. But as we get later in the week, he'd sometimes, not turn it over to the players, but we'd have player-led meetings on Friday. Larry'd get up and address the crew. I'd come in after, and we'd give our breakdowns on their top guys that we'd have to stop and the schemes they use versus our schemes and things like that. So, I think it was almost like a little crew of entrepreneurs as well. So you have to be able to do that. The best teams aren't just the best coached. It's usually when the players can sort of let loose and take things over as well.
Awesome. Well, thanks for that, Matt. Now, as promised, we have to jump into the gauntlet, so I hope you're ready. Just go through some quick hitters with you. Right off the bat, I need to know what's more important, having the number 1O or the number 1D?
Ooh, I'd say actually number 1O, because I think defense is a function of the offense. You can't be a number 1D if you've got a number 1O. Why? Because number 1Os score a lot of points, so it puts you in a different kind of game. If you're the number 1D, you're stuck. How many number 1Os are opposite number 1Ds? That usually doesn't happen.
Fair enough. Best team, the 01, the 03, or the 04 Patriots?
Wow. We'll just say the last one because my memory's not great, so I don't remember.
Fair enough. Antoine said the first one because they started it. So either way, no matter how you cut it, there's no wrong answer.
There's no wrong answer.
Now, a shootout or a defensive struggle?
I like the defensive struggles. I think those games are actually really fun. So I know fans prefer the other, but not me.
I'm right there with you. Now, is there a coach or a team that you wish that you had the opportunity to have played with or for?
I mean, it's a tough question, but I'd say not getting a taste of that 99 team with Coach Vermeil, but not actually playing outside of the preseason with that crew. I had a lot of respect for him. I mean, Dick's obviously a different kind of coach than Bill, but that was a pretty cool environment. Obviously, that was a special team to go on and do what they did in 99. Yeah, in the back of my head, I kind of wish I'd have stuck with that one. But, hey, ended up in a better spot down the road.
Yeah, that's right. Most talented teammate that you played with, not named Tom Brady?
Let's keep it on the defensive side of the ball because that's the guys we know most. And you could say Ty Law, again, he's right there. But I'll stick in my position. Willie McGinnis is a freak of nature. Willie is a broad-shouldered, narrow-hipped, super broad chest, giant hands, amazing punch, can move, can do just everything. Willie is like the Javon Curse after him and the maybe Jadeveon Clowney now. He was the physical freak of his generation, did so much for our defense from rerouting guys out in space to just absolutely dominating tight ends. And it's Willie. Willie's the answer.
All right. Spread offense or power offense?
Power. If it's spread, that means nickel and dimes in the field. I don't get to play. So let's get into the right.
Fair enough. And this is the last one. What's most important, the players or the scheme?
Oh, players, absolutely. There's no explanation, just play.
None needed.
Well, Matt, thanks again for coming on. You can find Matt Chatham on ESPN, writing for The Athletic, on Twitter at Chatham58. Is there any other places that you'd like to shout out where you can find you, or mostly on Twitter?
On the big ones, Chatham58. I'll interact on Twitter. Love to hear from you.
Awesome. Well, Well, I'm Chris Haddad, co-host Steve McGrath. Thanks again, as always, Matt, and we will see you guys next time.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks for having me, guys.
All right.